primeira da segunda metade do campeonato. Trata-se, portanto, da nona prova do Campeonato do Mundo, que neste momento tem Alain Prost à frente, 41 pontos, seguido de Ayrton Senna com 39, Gerhard Berger 25, Piquet 18, Boutsen 17, Alesi e Mansell com 13, Patrese com 10 pontos e depois Nannini com 7, Capelli com 6, Bernard com 4, Modena e Caffi com 2 e com 1 ponto Nakajima, Warwick e Suzuki. Grande Prémio de...
Welcome back live to Hockenheim, the start of the German Grand Prix just minutes away. Time to join your race commentators, Alan Tyndall and John Watson.
Well, here at Hockenheim, capacity crowd, the weather is absolutely sweltering. It's the 9th round of the World Championship, and you're looking at Alessandro Nannini and what he did in qualifying. It really was one of the more alarming accidents in the recent history of Grand Prix racing. Fortunately, he was perfectly all right, but John, it was quite a moment.
Yes, that certainly was. It was a very nasty moment for Nannini. He came into the chicane, hooked a wheel over the inside, the car spun and went backwards very quickly indeed into the tyre wall. But with the circuit safety features we have these days, the damage was really contained to the car, and Nannini was out of the car very quickly, walked away, and he's back in the spare car. In fact, they flew out another tub to build into a spare car for the weekend. So Benetton are back up to full strength with their cars. Nannini a little bit upset because that's the 3rd tub he's written off this year, and he doesn't really understand why.
Well, he was in the 5th row of the grid, and we're now looking at the current wonder boy really in motor racing, Jean Alesi, who is being very much pursued by all the top teams at the moment. John, there's an awful lot of tittle-tattle going along in the paddock. It's sort of driver signing time or driver changing time, and it's really worth keeping your ears open.
Well, I think Alesi is one of 2 men who are going to be the key to the driver changes for 1991, but there's one man, Nelson Piquet, who I feel will be very happy indeed to stay where he is with Benetton. With this new Ford V8 engine, he's, I think, getting more and more happy with the performance of his engine and car package. And again, Piquet was very impressive this morning. The Benetton Ford appears to be getting better as the weekend goes on. Maybe he doesn't have the ultimate power for qualifying, but could be a very, very good race package indeed.
Terry Boutsen and Riccardo Patrese, they improved their position pretty dramatically yesterday. Terry Boutsen is 6th fastest on the 3rd row of the grid, so the Williams-Renaults sharing that grid between themselves. And Boutsen, I think, a lot happier. They were much further down than they should have been after the first day's qualifying, but they were one of the few teams to really dramatically improve yesterday.
Yes, they dragged themselves up to 5th and 6th spot on the grid, and that was a fairly good effort. But I think that performance was more like a true performance. The Friday performance was not a reflection of what we normally expect. Riccardo Patrese in 5th spot on the grid, in the 3rd row with his teammate Thierry Boutsen. And looking at, I've got some information on tyres here, Alan. We've got Benetton and Leighton House have decided to start on the slightly harder, this more durable B compound. All the other Goodyear runners are starting on C. Goodyear are not anticipating pit stops for tyre changes, but as we've seen in the past, those predictions can very quickly change, because this is going to be a very, very hard race indeed. There's going to be a lot of pace, particularly at the front, and he who doesn't look after his tyres, take care, and the car is full of fuel, could well pay that inevitable penalty of a pit stop for tyres. But Nigel Mansell looking a little bit more relaxed than he was over the weekend. Again, very unhappy about some of the performance from his engine, complaining that Alain Prost is still quicker down the straight, and all the usual stories we've heard from him 2 weeks ago at Silverstone. But again, Mansell was very quick this morning, so maybe he's got something in mind that nobody else is aware of. But here was a spin in qualifying. Nigel came down into the right-hand corner into the stadium. He got a left front wheel over the curbing on the outside, and that just hoiked the car around, went into a spin, destroyed any chance of improving on that set of qualifying tyres. So I think he's hoping for a bit better today, but rather pensive looking Alain Prost sitting in his Ferrari, a man who's won the last 3 Grand Prix. And the point I think we cannot emphasize enough is that Prost has won those Grand Prix well away from the front row of the grid, and who's to say that couldn't happen again today.
Well, this is it. As we move towards the head of the grid, we're now in the Ferrari camp, occupying row 2, and really the warm-up this morning was an indication of just how close things could be this afternoon at Hockenheim. I think there's a great eagerness here. We're expecting a tremendous battle. Okay, it's the McLarens in the front row. Gerhard Berger, who very, very nearly matched his teammate's sensational time on Friday. In fact, so dominant were they on Friday that they were able to almost take Saturday qualifying off and use it as a race testing session. So Gerhard Berger, he was also involved with a slight incident with Donnelly in qualifying when Donnelly was coming up on his fast lap and was rather balked by Berger. Berger then immediately went out and did his time of 1 minute 40.434, over 150 miles an hour, quicker than anyone has ever gone except for his teammate Ayrton Senna, who's on pole, and what a mighty pole it was.
Well, that was a great lap, and as we saw it a few minutes ago, what was so impressive about it was how clean the lap was. It didn't look like a fast lap, and Senna's really evolved his qualifying technique to the level where he looks like he's going slowly. I mean, people like Jackie Stewart and other great drivers of their period also had that ability. Their quick laps didn't look quick, they made it look so easy. And here we are going to watch it again now. Senna just beginning the lap, exiting the corner. It's the 4th gear corner, now going down this first of these 4 long straights. Was on this straight as McLaren was timed at approximately 200 miles an hour. And remember, these cars have got 3.5 litre naturally aspirated engines. The Honda probably produces somewhere close to 700 horsepower in this qualifying trim. They're able to alter it very slightly, but look how clean he is out of that corner. No wasted energy, no sliding, picking up the throttle delicately and cleanly, and the car just accelerates out of the corner, maximizing the grip from those qualifying Goodyears. This is coming up to the second of the chicanes, a faster chicane, a very nasty one, that nasty curve in the inside, but see how Senna just slices through it and barely even kisses the curve on either side. Back into 4th gear, 5th gear, finally into 6th gear, and it's on this return leg back towards the stadium that on the Longines timing, some people saw speeds in excess of 200 miles an hour, in fact up to 214. Through this 4th gear chicane again, barely touching the curb in the exit. Really a perfect lap to this stage, and you can just tell now on the timing how fast Senna was travelling. 4th gear into this very enjoyable right-hand corner. The car runs wide. Try to avoid dropping the left rear wheel into the little dip at the side of the circuit. 2nd gear through the Sachs curve up to 3rd gear, then through this double right-hand corner which leads us on to the start-finish straight. Senna just entering the straight now. And this was this fantastic lap of 1 minute 40.198, an absolutely superb lap.
And it's interesting to know that the only man that ever approached that sort of speed here was Kiki Rosberg, who's sitting next to us in a commentary point here, and he did that back in 1986 in the full-blown turbo days. His qualifying lap was 1:42.012, so the progress in motorsport ever continues.
Yes, and in fact, you say progress, we always think of that as being purely in technical terms, but one of the things that teams are doing, and we believe McLaren are amongst those teams, is adjusting the tyre pressures, because a racing tyre is set at a relatively low pressure. As the tyre gets hot, the pressure rises, but what you set the tyre at on the grid is quite critical to how the tyre will perform, and we believe that McLaren are juggling around with those tyre pressures, and then just in that final effort to maximize the performance of the tyre and the car. And in fact, just looking at them, tyres on the car now having pressures adjusted. And this is one of the McLarens. You can see the tyre covers over the wheels to keep those tyres up to the temperature they want to start at, and that's very, very crucial. The whole thing, the temperature, the pressure, and that just is an illustration of how competitive Formula One is. And I'm not talking about people in the middle of the grid or the back of the grid. It's competitive at the front with Ferrari, McLaren, Williams and Benetton.
And indeed, all the tyre predictions from this morning seem to be correct. Pirelli are running the CD88 compound on Alessi alone, so that's interesting. All the other Pirelli runners are running on the CD93 compound, and that's the CD88 would be equivalent to the C's in Goodyears, to the B's in Goodyears, as the 89 is equivalent to the C's. On the Goodyear side, it's just March and Benetton, as you said, John, on the Bs, and everybody else is on the Cs. And it's really going to be absolutely crucial here, particularly people like Lotus, who were having terrible tyre problems in qualifying and indeed during the race in the heat. Lotus did begin to go quick when it got rather cooler, but once the heat came up again, and it is absolutely sweltering at the moment, you know, they were in trouble.
Yes, it's a problem they have with the car, really. The development and the finance to do the development is probably paying its toll at this stage in the season. So Lotus are, I think, really very unhappy. Derek Warwick and Martin Donnelly are capable of very much better, and we did see that in the cool of the morning on time sessions. So they've got a race now in much higher temperatures, and I'm sure they're sitting there not thinking very much about a very good day's racing.
So let's just remind you of the grid. The McLarens on the front row. On the second row, the Ferraris, Prost 141.732 and Mansell 142.057. And then Mansell really trying to improve that, had a little spin in qualifying. Then the Williams moving up on Saturday onto the third row. On the fourth row, we've Nelson Piquet in the leading Benetton, and Alessi always putting in a champion performance in the Tyrrell. And then Nannini in the second Benetton, a brave show there because he had a very major shunt in qualifying and fortunately was perfectly all right. Capelli with the Leighton House, John. Can we see any more miracles from them, do you think?
Well, I think we'll have to wait until the race, but certainly over the last two races, they've been one of the major stars.
Then Nakajima, good few places, as you can see, back from his teammate Alessi. Gujamin was lucky because he didn't get out really at all in the first day's qualifying, so he had a lot of work to do in the second day. Martini, Warwick the leading of the Lotuses, because Martin Donnelly was in all kinds of problems. There's Modena, Caffey going fairly strongly throughout the weekend. Alboreto, who had a major blow-up on one of the sessions, and Donnelly, who just was in all kinds of problems, really getting wrong tire choice and then getting pushed off on his fast lap. Brabham getting in quite comfortably. Larini there coming from, of course, pre-qualifying. Peroni, Alio again coming from pre-qualifying, and he was quick to Pirro.
Yes, and then we have the Leto and Wojtek, both Onyx, well, in fact, they're now Monteverdi's, not any longer an Onyx, Monteverdi Fords, both cars getting into the race, but that's a team, unfortunately, that is in the midst of turmoil with people leaving and the team transferring its base over to Switzerland, and it's a great shame because at its initiation it was a team that I think could have done great things and did a very good first season in Formula One, but with all the changes in ownership and the toing and froing that's taken place, it's gradually sliding back, and really one wonders how much longer they can continue in Formula One.
So during the Grand Prix we'll be riding along in the Benetton and indeed in the Lotuses, and this of course is Nelson Piquet on the warm-up lap, and all the checks that he will be going through at this time.
Yes, this is the final point up to the start of the race. Not going very quickly, as you see. The idea is that the pole position man, this time Ayrton Senna, controls the pace that the field will run at. Here they're fairly well spread out, but as we start returning back towards the stadium, you'll see Senna slowing right down and allowing the group of cars behind him to get into proper formation. And the one thing he doesn't want to do, of course, is get onto the pole position and then sit there for 2 or 3 minutes with an engine getting hotter and hotter while everybody else takes position behind him. But here we are. This is the third of those 4 straights. Senna now slowing down, Berger behind him. 3 Ferraris, Prost and Mansell.
And 45 laps lie ahead, 190 miles of high speed, and I really mean high speed motoring. The circuit length is 4.223 miles, one of the longer circuits in Grand Prix racing, and really in this heat it's going to require a lot of stamina, and fitness could come into it slightly, John, but I think really everybody in Formula One is pretty well super fit.
Well, they are fit. I think the biggest problem that Hockenheim usually presents is engines, because of these 4 long straights. The engines are flat out for such a long time that you tend to see a lot of mechanical retirements, and usually those mechanical retirements are engine related. So a hard race, I would say, more for the machinery than for the driver. Those long straights again give the driver an opportunity to catch his breath, to have a look around the car, check the instruments. The infield section that the car is coming through now, this is a bit twiddly and fiddly, but it's not a particularly physical circuit in my experience, and I think most of the the drivers out there would confer with that. But here we're looking at Gerhard Berger. You notice that funny windscreen, or what in fact is not a windscreen, but it's a piece of carbon fiber taking the place of a windscreen with a reverse lip on it. The idea behind all that is to help the airflow around the driver, around the airbox above the driver's head, which feeds the engine with cool air. But really, more importantly, it's to help the efficiency of the rear wing, that aerofoil section, the back of the car, and that is such a contribution to the car's handling. And by cleaning the airflow around the back of the car, you can improve the performance of the car. The lap times get quicker and quicker.
So Ayrton Senna coming up to sit on the 47th pole position of his career. Of course, it's a record. He's miles ahead of anybody else in terms of that, in terms of pole positions. 47 he has. The next nearest was Jim Clark, who sadly has associations, of course, with this track. Gerhard Berger, yet to have a win for McLaren, is alongside him. Then the two Ferraris, and Alain Prost, of course, third quickest, and one wonders indeed if we could see the fourth win in a row from this incredible Frenchman. So there's the setup, John. It's got all the prospects of an absolutely superb race.
Yes, I think we're going to see some fantastic motor racing, and certainly in the early laps, those four cars at the front, the two McLarens, the two Ferraris, I feel are going to make a bit of a charge. And here we are now all set, the flag waving at the back of the grid, everybody's in place, red lights are on. Go, it's green. And Senna's got to start, but Berger's pulling alongside him, coming up into the first right-hander, but Senna takes it, Berger second. The two Ferraris following through.
And the Ferrari's very close indeed, a bit of swapping and changing going on there.
But we've got Stefano Modena on here, we've got Pirro and Alio too. Some are just coming down. We've got two cars out, plus Stefano Modena, who was very slow indeed off the start. But here we are into the first chicane. Still the two McLarens, two Ferraris.
Two Williamsons, all basically in the grid order there at the moment as they stream through. Alessi went through, perfectly all right there. And just having lost those two, and it was right on the start line, and there may be a situation where they have to stop this race because the two cars are pretty well tied together down in front of us here, right on the start line.
Yes, indeed. Manuel Pirro's Scuderia Italia is on the start-finish line. All the course cars are still on the course. There are yellow flags being waved. So far we have not seen any sign of a red flag, but the cars now on the return back towards the stadium. Ayrton Senna first, Berger second, and we have to see whether there's going to be a decision to red flag this race. Currently yellow flags being waved furiously all the way from the corner onto the pit straight right up to the start-finish line, and the ONS course cars are working to clear Pirro's car away from the track. And we now have Senna in the stadium, Berger second, Prost third, Mansell fourth, Patrese fifth, Boutsen sixth, Piquet seventh, and Nini eighth, Alesi ninth, and Capelli in 10th spot.
And they're just coming now up to this considerable obstacle. Yellow flags, an absolute flag day here as Senna comes onto the straight. But as you can see, the course cars, everything being cleared well over to the right. So the race goes on, and Senna leads at the end of the first lap. So it's McLaren, Ferrari, and then the Benettons in echelon also as they come through. So let me just give you the order: Senna, Berger, Prost, Mansell, Patrese, Boutsen, Piquet, Nannini, Alessi, Capelli, Suzuki, Bernard, Nakajima, Warwick, Martini, Caffey, Alboreto, Gujabin, Larini and Donnelly in 20th position.
Right, and here we're going to see the start again, and if you can see that incident, yes, one car wheel loses a car. That I think is Pirro's Delara Scuderia Italia car spinning and gets collected by the Ligier, and Pirro getting punted into the, look, got a fairly severe backwards impact into that Armco barrier. Pirro currently in the car being attended by Professor Watkins, who's the Formula One doctor. Obviously, if there's any problem with Pirro, they don't want to move him until they're quite certain that he's in a safe condition to do so. Of course, the cockpit in these cars are very small. The cockpit orifice is very difficult to get in and out of, and they are prepared to take their time and get Pirro out without any undue stress. But Berger now closing up to the back of Senna, beginning to look like he wants to have a little bit of the sniff of the lead of this race, and Mansell now giving Prost the same kind of attention.
Patrese, on the other hand, has moved ahead a little bit of Boutsen, but he's under constant attention from Piquet. And still the yellow flags waving here in the arena area. could still be a situation that the race would be stopped, but they certainly are well over to the right-hand side of the track as the leaders come on this point now for the second time.
Yes, Senna leading, Berger second, Prost third, Mansell fourth. Of course, waved yellow flags means it is illegal to overtake, so they have to wait until they see a static green flag and then they're able to get on with the motor racing. But of course, nobody really in a position to do much passing anyway at that part of the circuit. But here's where action is about to take place. Berger starting to threaten Senna for the lead. Mansell trying to do the same on his teammate Alain Prost, but the two McLarens opening a gap on those two chasing Ferraris.
And Senna and Berger did a lap in 1:48.46. Now they were lapping consistently in about 1:46 in a race set up yesterday, but of course they're in full tanks and you would expect that at this time.
One man who hasn't come through is Martin Donnelly in the Lotus Lamborghini, so Martin probably stopped unfortunately out in the circuit somewhere. We haven't been able to pick him up, but he didn't come through on that lap.
And that sadly brings to the end a really miserable lap from weekend for Martin Donnelly. He really hasn't had a lot of luck at all this weekend. He was 17th in the first on-time practice, and then only scraped in qualifying in the second day, improved to 20th, but just has not been his weekend.
No, indeed. So I think Martin will be well happy to get away from Hockenheim. But Berger now having a little look. He's not really all that close, but I think what he's trying to do is make Ayrton Senna look in his mirrors to distract him, to make him aware that, well, I'm behind you. I'm not going to sit behind you just because you're first and I'm second. I'm not going to be content with that. I want to lead the German Grand Prix. I want to win the German Grand Prix, I think, is what Berger's saying right now.
And Senna still on his way, coming up to complete 3 laps. And quite a lot of attention we're getting further back, however, because Boutsen's under considerable attention from Piquet. Still yellow flags, so they can't overtake this part of the circuit. There's Prost, there's Mansell, there's and in fact, did we have a change there?
Yes,
John?
we have. Boutsen has dropped back about 3 spots. We got Capelli now in 9th spot, Boutsen in 10th spot, so something happened to Boutsen we didn't see. So we may well have had a little moment somewhere on the circuit. This is a very long circuit, and of course we're not always following the cars in the 5th through 8th, 10th spot, but Boutsen did lose ground. Owen Capelli now up into the top 10 in the 9th spot, and probably hoping he can begin the same kind of charge that we saw of him in Paul Ricard and at Silverstone. And with that car, it's currently considered to be the lightest and easiest car on its tyres, and they're running on the slightly more durable B compound, so they're not anticipating a pit stop at all. And of course, if other people do find themselves making pit stops, well, who knows what will happen with Rittenhouse. They may well end up again running in the top 3 or even having a top 6 finish.
And this is really the hottest battle here at the moment, with Patrese getting ever increased attention from Piquet and Nannini just behind him. Then as you can see, we've got quite a long gap before we get Alessi, who again leads another bunch, including Capelli, Boutsen, Suzuki, Bernard, Warwick, Nakajima, and Caffey. That's the order there.
Yes, there's a bit of a gap with Alessi and between Alessi and Nannini, but Capelli and Boutsen now back on Capelli's gearbox. So whatever Boutsen did wrong, it may have been something quite as simple as missing a gear and just losing the momentum on one of those straights that enabled those cars to pass him. But Boutsen getting on with the program again. But here we see the 4 lead cars all, in fact, getting closer together. The little lead McLaren opening out has now been evaporated. The 2 Ferraris, the 2 McLarens almost equidistant on the track. Senna, Berger, Prost, Mansell, Patrese a little further back with the 2 Benettons behind him, Piquet and Nannini, and then a further, oh, somebody's gone off. Coming out onto the straight, we can't see, a huge cloud of dust went up. We don't know whether somebody just dropped a wheel off. I suspect somebody's actually gone off the circuit. But we hope to get back and maybe have a look and see what that little incident was. But somebody in that group of cars running around about 10th slid off or got one wheel well off into the dust and threw up a huge cloud of it. Not the most pleasant thing for those people following behind to have to drive through, because they don't know what's on the other side of it, but can't have been too serious.
Would have been back about the Alessi, Capelli, Boutsen bunch there, because we've seen the others all go safely through. Prost and Mansell safely through, and then Piquet and Nannini running there in the background, just with of course Patrese ahead of them, and Piquet beginning to make a move there on Patrese.
Yes, and just looking a little bit beyond those 3 cars. In fact, there is a big gap, so whatever took place in the corner leading out of the stadium must have been some of the Alesi, Capelli, Boots and Suzuki, those 3 to 4 cars.
Still lapping about the 148 mark, and each time Senna is putting in a quicker lap as obviously the fuel goes down, but all the time the constant attention of Gerhard Berger there on his tail, and the Ferraris very much still in contention, and it augurs well for a most exciting Grand Prix this, because the Ferraris easily able to manage the McLaren's pace at this stage anyway, John.
Yes, and of course at this stage of the race, this is not unsimilar to what we have seen. It was really in the latter stages of the last 2 Grand Prix that we have seen the Ferraris come strong. But McLaren did spend all of Saturday afternoon running in that qualifying session in a race setup, and that was identical weather conditions to those now, so they've got a very, very good gauge on what they needed to do to their car to make it both fast but also gentle on the tyres. And at this stage certainly it's working, though they are not able, as one might have anticipated they could have done, to have pulled away. Prost and Mansell are just shadowing Senna and Berger move for move.
And I have a feeling Piquet would be very interested in trying to get past that Williams-Renault, because he certainly was pressuring them for a few laps. He's dropped back a little bit more now, but the first 4 beginning to move away now from that second group, and obviously Piquet would like to stay in touch with that battle.
Well, he would like to get past Patrese, obviously, because his car is capable of lapping faster, I think, but being behind Patrese, it may well be losing him time. If he will get past, then of course he would pull away from Patrese, I think, quickly. And here we see the 3 cars behind the lead 4.
And already a back marker coming up to be on the track just in front of them for a second.
Yes, that was Alio. That's the car that was involved in that start line shunt with Emanuele Pirro, so he lost a lot of time, and he's running now in the race, and he's virtually a lap behind. He's only a lap, about 200 yards short of a lap behind the lead car, so for Alio it's not going to be a very entertaining or enjoyable German Grand Prix either. He's going to have to drive and really have little chance of anything.
So as they come up to complete their 6th lap, Ayrton Senna in the lead from Berger, Prost and Mansell, and that's the leading 4 group. And we're inside Piquet's car now, chasing Patrese onto the long straight that takes us down to the first chicane, and this is where he will probably try and get into the slipstream a little bit, and but it won't be close enough to dive out on this occasion.
Well, you can see he's catching up to Patrese, but I don't think it's sufficient to be able to do anything under braking coming into this first chicane. And of course Patrese will defend his position to the maximum. He is pretty experienced. This is his 201st Grand Prix, so he's not going to be too impressed by Piquet coming up in his mirrors. He's going to ensure that he doesn't leave any door open, and Nelson's going to get past. It's going to be by having to apply himself and work pretty hard at it. But here we see again the 4 lead cars. Nothing's changed. The gaps more or less the same. They tend to seesaw a little bit as one comes into the chicane and the other exits the chicane, but on balance the gap between the cars is more or less equidistant. But Alio now in our line of view, and Senna will want to dispose of Alio preferably before he enters the stadium, because that would give him a substantial advantage over his 3 pursuers.
And there you go, Larini, number 25, but that in fact is Alio. And there they are in the stadium section now. He's going to get round. Yes, Alio being rather good there really, but holding up Berger slightly, giving Prost an undoubted slight advantage. You really see the 2 Ferraris now on his tail. Certainly both are through, so little change there. And as Ayrton Senna comes up to complete his 7th lap here of the German Grand Prix, the order is McLaren, then Ferrari, Patrese, Piquet and Nannini.
He slowed right down. He ruined Berger's corner. In fact, nobody's hurt and it doesn't matter. But if it had been in more important circumstances with people trying to change places in the race and he had done that, that would have been really out of order. It was just unnecessarily stupid.
Lap 8, you may be wondering if tyre changes are expected. Officially, they are not going to be coming in. But such is the heat and such is the pace and such will be the pressure that they may decide to do so. But I say again, as James has already said, that the 4 lead cars are on a softer compound than the Benettons, and that may work to the advantage of Piquet and Nannini.
Yes, and I was watching in the background then when we were watching the leading 4. I could see Piquet really starting to press Patrese, and I think he's looking for a way round, and the straight as they come down to the stadium is the quickest part of the circuit and where he's likely to make his move.
Race order, lap 8. Ayrton Senna leads. Gerhard Berger second. There is Senna. Third is Prost. Fourth is Mansell. Fifth is Patrese. Sixth right behind him is Piquet. Then Nannini.
And watch for Piquet coming into the stadium this time. He's well placed into that chicane.
Well, welcome back to Hockenheim, and as you can see, it's Ayrton Senna still in the lead from Berger, Prost, Mansell, Patrese and Piquet. They have completed, just about to complete their 8th lap of 45 laps. And Senna now beginning to show a slight domination, but Berger not far behind. It was only a gap of just over a second on the last lap. And there is a slight confusion when you'll see them coming streaming down the straight here. They're the 2 McLarens, the 2 Ferraris, with Prost leading Mansell for 3rd and 4th place. And then the lapped Alio will come into picture, should do shortly in a second. And then immediately behind him will be Patrese, Piquet and Nannini.
Senna now extending his lead. He's got a 1.3 second lead. I think that lead was aided a little bit by the overtaking of Alio. Berger got slightly held up, but of course you're talking about such small amounts of time that it's almost impossible to measure it except on a stopwatch. But Senna just appears to have that slight increase in his lead, and of course Berger likewise managing to edge away ever so slightly from Alain Prost, with Mansell in his shadow, wheel to wheel.
And John, in a sense, conservation is the name of the game at this stage, isn't it? We notice them certainly not going over curbs, trying to not excite their tyres too much. But having said that, it looks like Mansell might be thinking of going past his teammate at the moment.
Well, I think he would like to, as much as Berger wants to pass Senna, Mansell wants to pass Prost. But the key, I think, at this point in the race is the ability to try and run as fast as you can, but not go over the point where you start to hurt your car. It's a familiar story. It's one we talk about at every Grand Prix. It's the conservation, particularly those round black things in each corner of the car called tyres. If you take care of them, then they will look after you at the end of the race. But it's a fine balance between running quick enough and taking the lead and maintaining that lead, but not driving too hard where you take the best of the tyre at a point of the race, of course, where it really is of not tremendous significance.
Nigel Mansell there, a nice close of him, who shocked the Grand Prix world at Silverstone, announcing his retirement. He doesn't want to talk about it really anymore. He says that's history now. He's sticking to his decision, but certainly one of the questions that we were asking, he's lost none of that motivation. Again, we're back with Piquet shadowing Patrese, as he has done for 9 laps now in this German Grand Prix.
Yes, we're talking about Nigel Mansell and his retirement, and there's been a lot of gossip and tittle-tattle, let's call it that, in the paddock. And there is a suggestion that if the right package, a World Championship winning package, was available to Nigel Mansell, it is possible, rumour has it, that he might reconsider his decision that he made at Silverstone. But that wasn't from Nigel Mansell, that was from all the other members of the press who are waiting for every word that Nigel has to give them. So the situation is not maybe as clear, as black and white as Nigel implied when he made his retirement announcement at Silverstone.
So Ayrton Senna, who has already had 3 victories this year, and of course trails Alain Prost by 2 points in the World Championship. Very keen to redress the balance. It's gone Ferrari's way for the last 3 Grand Prix, and McLaren very keen. Maybe that's an underestimation. Absolutely desperate almost to redress this balance, and if they can do it here at Hockenheim, they would be a very happy team indeed. But there is possibly the biggest threat of all, Alain Prost, who leads, as we say, the World Championship, flaming out of the back, almost like the turbo days there, John.
Yes, they were doing that all weekend, and it's a totally unusual feature of a normally aspirated engine to show flame from the back of the car, and I'm quite curious to know where they've got the spare fuel to do that. But further down the field, we've now got Boutsen, who's up in 8th place and got past Ivan Capelli in the Rittenhouse, and in fact that car appears to be losing a little bit of ground to the the Williams Renault Boutsen. I saw Senna there pitching off one of his rip-offs, that thin film of plastic that he puts across the visor on his helmet. So that's quite an early rip-off for Ayrton Senna. It looks like he's got a couple of them on. There's another one on his helmet. You can see the slightly opaque-looking helmet of Ayrton Senna.
And you can see that the times have come down by a second since the beginning of the race. So after 10 laps, the situation is Ayrton Senna first, Berger second, Prost third, Mansell fourth, Patrese fifth, Piquet sixth, Nannini seventh, Boutsen is eighth, Capelli ninth, 10th is Alessi, 11th Warwick, 12th Suzuki, 13th Bernard, 14th Nakajima, 15th Cafe, 16th Gujabin, 17th Larini, 18th Martini, 19th Wojtek, and in 20th position Brabham.
And we've got a rather slow and I think fed up looking Michele Alboreto in the Arrows, Footwork Arrows, about to come into the pits, so he's not going to make a pit stop for tires. He's going to make a pit stop, I think, and that'll be the end of his day.
Once again, Nigel Mansell getting very, very close to Prost, and one would always wonder that running that close behind him, he must be in disturbed air.
Yes, he is, and that's always a problem when you run close to another car. You lose the momentum. Here we're going back to Piquet. It looks like he's overshot the corner ever so slightly in his efforts to get past Patrese. And is he going to go straight on? Is he going to go straight on? He has. He decided that rather than attempt to take the corner and slide across the curb, he's gone straight on at the first chicane. Now he's got to go through that tower wall. There's no advantage to him doing this. In fact, it may well work out to be a disadvantage because this is a very, very slow return to the track. He's got to negotiate his way around those tires and the bollards, so Piquet has lost ground.
Indeed, he's lost a place. Not only he was pressurising Patrese. Patrese can take, comparatively speaking, a bit of a rest now, but Nannini, his teammate, has gone ahead of him up into 6th place. So Piquet back to 7th with that overtaking manoeuvre that just didn't come off.
But saying that, Nigel Mansell has just clocked the fastest lap in the race, 1:47.268. So the boys are getting on with the programme.
Getting on with the programme very much for McLaren, Ayrton Senna, who's now got a 1.43 second advantage. So he really is beginning to put a little bit of distance between himself and his teammate now. And there you see again that obviously Nigel Mansell is getting fed up with a back view of Prost Ferrari, and he would like to very much get on with possibly an attack on Berger.
Well, Mansell wants to get on with an attack on anybody who's ahead of him. He wants to be at the front of the field. But these two cars at the front, this is the team that really, really wants to win this race. I would say more than anybody else. It's an important race to them from many factors. They've been beaten in the last 3 races. They, in fact, probably have beaten themselves on some of the occasions. They want to win at Hockenheim. They want to reassert their authority, their control in Formula One. And this race is the race in which they feel they can do it. The next race is in Hungary. It's not a circuit that really suits the McLaren so much. We saw Mansell there winning brilliantly from 12th in the grid. So they're not entirely confident about the result they may get in Hungary, but this is one race they feel they can win, and they've worked extremely hard, the team, the drivers, everybody, to get their 2 cars to run at the front, not just at this point in the race, we're on the 13th lap, but at the end of the 45th lap.
And indeed, after those 13 laps, the amazing thing, John, is there's absolutely no change in the top 5. It's Senna, Berger, Prost, Mansell and Patrese. Then Nannini now up to 6th, Piquet having dropped down to 7th, Boutsen 8th, Capelli 9th, and Alessi in 10th place. And the Ferraris a little bit more spread out this time. The gap is gradually going up between Senna and Berger, now up to 1.478 seconds. Prost, on the other hand, is 1.8 seconds behind Berger. And of course, Mansell is just 0.7 of a second behind him. And these 4 pulling reasonably well away now from the rest, because the pursuing man, Patrese, who is on his own a bit now, is a further 6 seconds behind.
Yes, we've had a couple of people in the pits. JJ Leto came in, he's got a broken exhaust, spitting and banging. He's gone out on a fresh set of tyres, but that's not going to be much fun. Maurizio Gugelmin, a surprise visitor to the pits, changing tyres as well. He started, remember, on the harder B compound tyre, and that's a complete surprise to see the Leighton House in the pits. That's the car that is meant to be the lightest car on tyres in the field, and here we are.
And
David
David
changed
Brabham,
tyres.
John. David Brabham also in the pits there. So a lot of early visitors. But of course the Monteverdis both getting into this Grand Prix, which was quite an achievement. And indeed, Letho, there was an extraordinary discovery in his car that must have held him back all season. They've discovered that something, it sounds crazy, but the diff was the wrong way round in that car.
Well, that's what they're saying. I asked one of the more educated people in the field, and they said it's impossible to do that. But of course, you never know. Certainly, Letho had a lot of problems with drive shaft failures. They reckoned that was the answer. They changed the diff around, and he's been running reliably since. Here we are back with Nelson Piquet. Interesting fact, Piquet went down the escape road, and in doing so he rejoined the track by avoiding going through the chicane. I remember a certain Ayrton Senna suffered a penalty. He suffered disqualification from the Japanese Grand Prix last year for appearing to do the same thing. So maybe Nelson may find himself at a later point in the race being showed a black flag. But I think it really says more for the decision about Senna's use of the escape road in Japan than Piquet doing it here. Piquet didn't do it for any advantage. He did it because he made a mistake under braking. The penalty he paid was losing a place to teammate Nannini, and I suspect he will be able to continue throughout the race and not be penalised. But looking at Gugelmin, he did change his tyres, but obviously that problem was not just a tyre problem. He's got the engine cover off. They're looking around the back of the car. So I suspect Gugelmin will sit there for a few more minutes and may go out and try and see if there's any improvement. Otherwise he'll be back in the pits, and that'll be the end of his day.
And as each lap peels by, we notice that little gap between first and second is gradually ticking up. It's now to 1.508 seconds. Prost, on the other hand, is 2 seconds behind the McLaren. And then Nigel Mansell still, as we can see in the background there, still shadowing his teammate. And one wonders when he will decide it is time to really put on this attack, because he's always in a position to make the attack. And this time, weaving a little bit behind Prost, but not just quite close enough to dive out of the slipstream. Still Patrese in 5th place, still Nannini 6th, Piquet 7th, and Boutsen in 8th place.
And here we have Alain Prost, Nigel Mansell again closing up under brakes into this first chicane. As that always, the camera tends to foreshorten all this, and suddenly the gap appears to widen as Prost is on the throttle sooner. So it is a misleading thing that we do see under heavy braking into chicanes, but the gap between Senna and Berger certainly isn't an artificial gap. That is a gap that is increasing, and Senna does appear to be able to be pulling away. On Mansell riding over the curb, bottom of the car, bellying on that curb, so that's going to cost him a second or 3. In fact, Mansell, there he is on the old circuit. Mansell has gone right off the circuit in that second chicane.
And that was a major moment. He will possibly also, John, have kind of destroyed the underneath of that car. He could have done a lot of damage because it went well up in the curbs. They're fairly high at that point.
Yes, they are. The car would have ridden over it. You can see Mansell, in fact, in trouble. He's coming into the pits. Patrese and Nannini have passed him. So Mansell, by sliding over the pits, sliding over the chicane, the front of the car, you can see something under the car on the right-hand side is flapping. I think it's part of the wing end plates. Trailing on the ground, Mansell here running wide just at this point, and that is quite a high curb. The car going onto the grass. Mansell will have to fight very hard to keep it in control. That's very, very dusty. The grass is extremely dusty. And of course, the bit of tarmac beyond that, there's not much grip. But Gerhard Berger is in the pits. The second place man is in the pits. Car is up. 4 wheels off. 4 wheels on. And that was a good stop for Berger. But that was an unexpected stop. Alain Prost also in the pits. We were told before the race they didn't expect to see any pit stops. But second and third place man have both been in the pits. Both have had tyre stops. Both have had good tyre stops. But Nigel Mansell, here we see him coming into the pits. Seatbelts undone. His race is over for the day, steering the car into the pits, and that is a very disconsolate Nigel Mansell. I don't think there'll be too many people will have a chance to ask him what went wrong.
Well, suddenly it all happened on the 15th and 16th laps there. Quite amazing. Nigel Mansell going off in 4th place onto the old circuit as he overshot and onto the curbs. Then we've had the 2 pit stops of Berger and Prost, so Senna now will have a fairly large advantage. It's 5.9 it was recorded there on the last lap after 15 laps. Prost 1.0 second behind him. Then Patrese is still in 4th place, Nannini 5th, and Piquet 6th. So Senna, now I wonder what sort of condition his tyres are in.
Well, certainly Senna's got a gift at the minute because his teammate was in the pits. Third baseman Prost dived in the same lap. So suddenly Senna's got a much larger lead than that we are seeing here currently from the pits. We have to wait for Senna to come across the start-finish line to be able to give you that lead he has on Berger and Prost in third spot. But for some reason it was unexpected to see Berger in the pits so early in the race, and then even more surprising, Alain Prost, because the Ferrari has always been considered to be an easier car on its tyres than the McLaren. Yet Ayrton Senna, whose tyres appear to us from here to be in immaculate condition, currently leading the race. And we're waiting, we've just got view now of Berger. He's in the infield. Prost is probably about 7 seconds behind Berger. So we have to wait now for Berger to come across the start-finish line. It's Patrese in second place, 15.6 seconds behind Senna. Nannini 0.7 behind him, Piquet 3.6 behind him, Berger in fifth spot, Boutsen sixth, and I expect we'll see Alain Prost then coming now through in seventh.
So that's certainly turned the German Grand Prix literally upside down there, and we had been told by Goodyear that they didn't expect tyre stops, but in fact, of course, very different to those predictions.
But we believe at the end of this lap you're going to see this man, the leader, Ayrton Senna, coming in on the next lap. So after this, if we do one more lap after this lap, and then Senna will come into the pits and change his tyres. So whatever the strategy these teams have been telling their tyre companies, or what they've been telling us, the commentators, has certainly not been the case. But there you see the McLaren pits ready to accept Ayrton Senna's car. We believe he's going to finish this lap, do one more lap and then come in, but let's wait and see. Senna may decide. The pits are ready for him. He will be in contact with the pits. He's coming. In fact, I believe we're going to see Senna coming in now. He's got a clear pit lane. The McLaren mechanics are standing there. They've got those four wheels ready. They've got the air guns ready. The car will be jacked up, and with a little bit of luck, Senna will have those four Goodyear wheels and tyres changed somewhere around about 7 seconds, and he will be able to continue. He probably will lose the lead. He's got a 15-second lead over Riccardo Patrese, and Senna is in the pit lane. This rather slow entry in, but he's the first pit in the pit lane. He will be able to get his tyres on, locking up the front brakes as he comes in. The clock now running. Both rear wheels off easily. Both rear wheels on. That's a great stop. 6 point. That's the quickest stop I've ever seen. That is fantastic. Senna out of the pit lane, and we've got Nannini and Patrese. Nannini having just, I believe, taken the lead, but Senna going back out onto the circuit, and he is now fighting. He's in second place behind Nannini, Patrese in third, but Senna on new tyres is going to try and pull out and pass Nannini before this first chicane. He's got the horsepower to do it. Can he make it? No, he's decided not to. He's going to wait. Alessandro Nannini leading the race on the 18th lap. Ayrton Senna second just behind him, but remember, Senna on fresh tyres. Nannini and Patrese in third spot have not yet been into the pits. Prost and Berger have made pit stops for tyres. Berger running fifth, Prost running seventh, and it's all happening. It's unbelievable.
It certainly is, because obviously while Senna was in getting the tyre change, Nannini had got past Patrese, and that's the situation you're seeing at the moment. So Senna now, he tried, as you saw the minute he came out, to get past Nannini. Now he's cooled it a little bit. So there's the new leader, Alessandro Nannini, who has survived a major qualifying accident here at Hockenheim and now leads the Grand Prix. And Senna getting a bit of a twitch on there, John. That was a little bit surprising, but maybe they're not up to temperature yet, the tyres.
Well, we don't know which tyre he's fitted. He could have gone again for the more durable B tyre. And these tyres ought to be up to temperature. They had the tyre warmers on them, so they will be close to operating temperature. But it is a fresh set of tyres, and it might just take him this one lap. But we've now got the first 5 cars covered by probably something like 3 seconds. The man in fifth spot, Gerhard Berger, can see across the infield and see Nannini in the lead, Benetton. So probably not more than 3 seconds between the first 5 cars. But remember, Ayrton Senna's been in the pits and changed tyres, and so has Gerhard Berger. Nannini, Patrese and Piquet have not yet been in the pits for a tyre stop.
Well, now we've got a true indication of what's it all about, because after lap 18 we see that Nannini leads by 1.7 seconds from Senna. Prost is Patrese is in third place, Piquet fourth, Berger in fifth place, Boutsen is sixth, Prost is seventh, and Capelli is eighth.
And Alessandro Nannini, in fact, is far from being caught by Senna, is pulling away from Senna. Now this is an unusual situation. I would expect Senna on his fresh rubber to be able to very quickly indeed reel in Alessandro Nannini. He's on his 19th lap. These tyres are almost half race old, yet he's managing to pull away. He's just on a lap of 1 minute 47.662. That's his quickest lap in the race, and we believe it is the quickest lap by anybody so far in the race. Ayrton Senna running second, Patrese third, Piquet fourth and Berger fifth. That is the order as we see it right now.
Could it be, John, that Senna has gone in and made a wrong tyre choice? It's looking very like it at the moment.
Well, I don't know. I really don't know what to say. All I can assume is that McLaren have chosen to put him on the B compound, which is the more durable compound. But remember, Nannini started on B compound tyres. So whatever Nannini has got, maybe the tyre works in a better heat range than Senna's got his tyre into. But certainly Nannini has been able to pull away on that first flying lap that we have seen Senna on since he had his pit stop.
And look at this behind, between Patrese, Piquet and Berger. There's an awful lot of shuffling going on there. There's Gerhard Berger in 5th place at the moment, and trying very hard indeed. And then Patrese coming in for the pit stop. So as Patrese goes the pit road, one of the major runners still to get tyres. Join us again shortly on Eurosport.
Quicker, so Nannini's times are coming down without having to stop the tyres, and he's actually stretched his lead a tiny bit over Senna. So, as we surmised at the beginning of the programme, this may be the clever way to go, depending on whether they can last without a stop. Remember, they're still not at half distance yet, quite, so if the Benettons are going to stop, they ought to be stopping very soon. That's Piquet followed by Berger, who's at the back of that little leading group of 4.
Well, one of the Tyrrells has just come in and undershot its pit, misjudged the distance and has had to accelerate onwards again. And it was Jean Alesi who was in 9th position. And so there is Piquet. And the significant thing to me is that Senna has not yet got to grips with Nannini, the leader. I was going to say nor has Berger got to grips with Piquet, who is now in 3rd position, and we are riding.
To say that everything is happening here at Hockenheim is an underestimation, because the Grand Prix here is quite sensational. Alessandro Nannini leads, Senna's in 2nd, Piquet 3rd, Berger's 4th, Patrese's 5th, Boutsen 6th, and Prost is in 7th place, but Alesi has just overshot the pits, John. You saw that.
Yes, Jean Alesi came into the pits. He was too quick. He locked up the front brakes. He tried to turn in, but if he had done, he'd have mowed down the entire Tyrrell team. He turned away from that. He's now had to go back out onto the racetrack, and he'll have to complete another lap. That little episode has probably cost Alesi, I would think, 15 seconds in that lap. A little bit of inexperience in his part. Too eager coming into the pits too fast.
And we're riding with Piquet right now, who has Berger right on his tail, and in view just ahead of him, Senna. So there's Senna behind Nannini, then we have Piquet, and then Berger. So the Ford engines showing extremely strongly here in Germany.
Well, this has been an impressive showing from Benetton. Remember, the 2 Benetton cars have yet to make a pit stop 4 tyres, but they started on the more durable, the slightly harder B compound tyre. And we wonder, have the 2 McLarens, had they actually changed from the C tyre they started on to the B compound the Benettons are running on? They didn't anticipate a pit stop, but as we have seen, within less than half distance, both the McLarens and Prost Ferrari have been in the pits. Now we've got Alesi getting it correct. He's in the Tyrrell pits having his Pirelli tyres changed. He didn't expect to have to make a pit stop either, but he's in the pits, another set of new Pirelli boots on his car, and off he goes.
There was a very quick stop, John, but he's away back in 12th position. He's really probably, at this stage, blown the German Grand Prix. But the Benettons, as we say, going very strongly indeed. Piquet using all the curbs and a little bit more there to try and stay ahead of the 2nd McLaren, Gerhard Berger. And just to remind you of the major retirement so far, Nigel Mansell, who rode over the curbs earlier on, damaged the underside of the Ferrari and retired.
They've got a spinner off at the Sachs curb. You're just looking to it now. There's a car of the Marshalls, one of the Monteverdis.
There's 2 cars in there, John?
No, it's not. It's just one car. We just got one of the Monteverdis, but it's stopped in a rather precarious place. Of course, the car is buried up to its axles in that gravel. That's Mr. Wojtek spinning his rear wheels. He's not going to achieve anything there. That car is more or less out of the race. still thinks he's going to get out of it. Those slick tyres have got zero grip in the gravel trap. Marshals are going to signal to him now, Mr. Wojcik, please get out of your car. But here we are back, Nannini and Senna. Senna having done a lap of 1:46.311. That's the fastest lap now in the race. And Senna's tyres obviously up to temperature. He's found probably the handling characteristic in this set of tyres maybe slightly different to those on the C's he might have started on. He may well have adjusted the car, the rear roll bar in the car, from the cockpit adjustable roll bar. So that's possibly been the reason why we've seen Senna taking somewhat longer to catch up to and attack Nannini for first place. But now Senna is attacking. He's lapping just under a second faster than Nannini. So Nannini is going to have a substantial amount of pressure from Ayrton Senna. Nelson Piquet in third, and he's under pressure from Gerhard Berger in fourth, and the second of the McLaren Hondas. Thierry Boutsen in fifth, now Prost up to sixth. He's got past Patrese. Patrese had his pit stop, of course, so Prost in the points with 1 point, but he's got a lot of work to do now to get to the front, to get up to where Senna is, where Nannini is. Prost is really going to have to do an awful lot of work, and I would say at this stage in the race it's unlikely.
So the 31-year-old Italian from Siena leads Ayrton Senna at the moment, and he's pulled out a little bit in that stadium. It was a lot closer at the back of the circuit there. And a twitch again there, John. That would be an indication that maybe something is now beginning to go wrong with the Benetton's tyres. And another retirement. That's one of the Minardis.
Yes, that's Pierluigi Martini in his Minardi. He's pulled off. I suspect that's been an engine failure. It's the normal thing here. Car stopping out in one of the long straights. Usually the engine's taking a major dump, and Pierluigi will have a long walk back. It's a very pleasant day for a long walk, but I'm sure he'll be prepared to finish the race.
So as Nannini still wards off the constant pressure from Ayrton Senna, who on the last lap, they're on the 23rd lap now of this 45-lap race. And Senna really possibly can take his time to deal with this situation a little bit. We can see Berger now also closer on Piquet. So it's an exactly same situation for first and second and third and fourth. And then behind that we have got quite a gap. We've got a 10-second gap before Boutsen comes up. And right on his tail is Prost. Then it's Patrese. Then Capelli in 8th place. 9th place is Suzuki. 10th Bernard. And then once again, of course, the LaRusse is doing very well in the Grand Prix and showing well all weekend. And 11th it's Nakajima. 12th is Derek Warwick. And those are the ones that have completed their 22nd lap.
Yes, we've got Alex Caffey now in the pits in his footwork arrows, changing his tyres. Fairly routine stop for Caffey.
Looks like Senna's going to make a move, John. I thought he was much closer that time.
Well, he may have been closer, but not close enough. Nannini has responded to Senna's attack. He's now running in the middle 146s, the same time that Senna's been doing. And remember, Nannini has not been into the pits to change tyres. Ayrton Senna has been in. Here's 6th place man Alain Prost on the gearbox of Thierry Boutsen. We believe Boutsen is going to try and run through the race without a pit stop. It's a fairly gutsy ploy on the part of Boutsen, but of course, having missed that little window in which the pit stops have been taking place, if he did decide to go in now, it may well be that he would lose a top 6 position. In fact, may never get back into it again. But Senna looking more serious about an attempt at passing Alessandro Nannini. But I tell you, the speed of the Benetton in the straight is impressive. But Senna, well, he had a little feint at it, wasn't really far enough up. Thought he might try to bluff Nannini, but Nannini was saying, well, I'm not going to have any of that today, thank you, Ayrton. My car's running strong, you know it's running strong as well. If you want to get past me, you're going to have to work.
And the similar situation with Piquet and Berger. In fact, Piquet's got a slightly bigger advantage over Berger there in the last shot that we saw. But certainly the first and second are incredibly close.
And just somebody else has gone wide coming out. Well, again, it's one of the Onyxes. I think that was JJ Later. He ran wide, exiting that second chicane. He's running slowly. And we've got a blown up car. That is Piquet. Piquet's engine has blown up. Coming out of the second chicane, we just saw that telltale whiff of blue smoke. And Piquet's race is over.
So that promotes Berger up into 3rd place, Boutsen to 4th, Prost to 5th, and Patrese in the points at 6th.
And Piquet pulling across left to right, pulling over to the right. Now Alain Prost right on the gearbox of Thierry Boutsen. Nelson Piquet just trundling down, coming up to the entry to the 3rd chicane. And that's the end of his day, and it's a sad day for the two Benettons. One of them now dropping out with a blown-up engine. Alessandro Nannini, of course, leading the race in his Benetton Ford, this V8 engine, built, designed, developed by Cosworth on behalf of Ford, and it's showing it as seems to be a match, horsepower for horsepower, with the Honda V10 engine in Ayrton Senna's McLaren.
So Nelson Piquet just using his car as a grandstand seat at the moment. Not probably a very comfortable one, John, because not a lot of room in those. A lot more comfortable being outside it than inside it. Still Senna not making an attempt on this lap. He's on his 25th lap of the 45-lap race. So it's still Nannini from Senna. Now Berger in third place, Boutsen in fourth, Prost right on his tail in fifth place, and Patrese, the other man in the points.
And here we have now JJ Lehto has entered the pits, his car undoubtedly needing a little bit of attention after his escapade at the second chicane, going over the same curbing that Mansell went over. It seemed to lead to Mansell's retirement. I wonder will JJ Lehto suffer the same fate, but it looks like Nannini is beginning to actually edge away from Ayrton Senna.
And we can see the tow trucks taking away. It's probably the other Benetton there in the background. There it is indeed. As the first and second situation is, as you say, John, spreading out a little bit. Berger is a good 5 seconds behind the first two. Boutsen is 13 seconds down in that, and Prost is crawling all over him in fifth place. Patrese 6th, Capelli 7th, 8th is Suzuki, 9th Bernard, 10th Warwick, and 11th Alesi.
And as you say that, Alain Prost has just taken fourth spot from Thierry Boutsen. Remember, Boutsen has not been into the pits to change his tyres. We believe that Boutsen has decided not to make a pit stop. He's going to try and soldier on. He's now dropped to fifth spot. To fifth spot. Prost in fourth spot. So Prost has now got a 13-second bit of work to do to catch up to the gearbox of Gerhard Berger in the second of the two Honda McLarens.
So with Nannini leading still on the original rubber that he came out, and Senna in second place on C rubber, we've just been informed. So Senna went back onto C, as did Berger in third place, and that's an interesting bit of information. And there we see the overtaking maneuver of Prost once again.
Well, those C tyres appear not to be helping Ayrton Senna all that much. The only thing I can suggest is that Ayrton Senna, having had to make a pit stop early in the race to change his tyres, has decided to be extremely prudent, because he doesn't want to have to make another pit stop to change again. So he may well decide to hold back. Maybe not. Maybe this is the best he's able to do. Maybe Nannini has got the measure of the two Honda McLarens on this German Grand Prix.
And of course Nannini only with one Grand Prix win to his credit so far in his career, and that being a fairly controversial one, involving of course the man behind him, Mr. Ayrton Senna. But Nannini obviously very desperate to get a second Grand Prix win, but an awful lot of pressure behind, with the two McLarens running like clockwork and seeming to be fairly well in control of the situation, of able to stay in touch with the Benetton at the moment.
Well, the Benetton has just set the fastest race lap again at 1:46.288. In fact, Senna's lap was quite a lot slower at 47.2, a full second slower. Gerhard Berger in the third, running almost at the same pace as Nannini in the front. So Senna has had what would appear to be a little bit of a breather in the middle of the race on the 26th lap.
John,
Just about to start the Well, difficult to tell. We're sitting here watching it, but the gap between Nannini and Senna has stretched. Not just on the stopwatch, we can now visually see that Senna is dropping back, but Gerhard Berger is also catching up to Ayrton Senna. Senna now responding by getting back into the middle of 46s, so whatever his problem was, he seems to overcome it. And he's now back on a charge, but he's got to make up over 1.5 seconds to catch up to Nannini in his Benetton Ford. It seemed Nannini could open up the gap fairly much at will upon Ayrton Senna. That's an unusual sight for Ayrton Senna, to see a car ahead of him being able to seesaw away from him more or less at will.
It certainly opened that gap. It would make you think that it was more than just a rest, indeed some sort of major problem. But Nannini there giving the Benetton a fair old thump over the chicane that time.
Yes, it's not a very good thing to do that in the course of a race. The amount of loads that go through a car's suspension through the chassis when they bump those curbs as violently as that is, it's quite frightening, in fact. And that's why these Grand Prix cars are stripped down and rebuilt after every time they run, because the margins are run that they run to are extremely fine. The cars, of course, are very, very strong indeed, but that kind of abuse does put enormous loads into parts that were never really intended to have that kind of loading applied to them. But Gerhard Berger trying to close the gap between himself and teammate Ayrton Senna in second place. And Berger, I would say, is getting visually closer to his teammate, and of course that's the greatest encouragement a driver can have, is to see the gap between you and the car you're chasing beginning to reduce. He's got to get through or by one of the Tyrrells. Sean Lacey is between the two cars, but of course he's been lapped.
And that gap has gone up to 1.7 seconds between first and second. Berger's just 5.2 seconds behind Senna in third place. And we can see that Nannini again has done a startling lap, 146.14, and I'm just looking at the existing lap record is 145.71, which Nigel Mansell holds from 1987, so we're getting down towards those times.
Yes, and Mansell's time, of course, was done in one of those phenomenally powerful turbocharged Honda engines, which probably ran something like 1,000 horsepower in a Grand Prix in those days. These cars running Honda probably close to 700. The Benetton with the V8 Ford engine maybe somewhere around about 650, 660. The difference in performance appears to lie in the chassis, but it's still an amazingly impressive performance from Nannini. He has responded to Senna's challenge, and he's constantly setting fastest lap after fastest lap, and is getting closer to smashing Nigel Mansell's 3-year-old lap record set, one of those powerful V6 Honda turbos.
And at the end of the 27th lap, the leaders are now on the 28th. It was Nannini from Senna, Berger in third place, Prost fourth, fifth was Boutsen, 6th Patrese, 7th Capelli, 8th Suzuki, 9th Bernard, 10th Warwick, and 11th Lacey. And as Nannini comes back into the stadium section once again in a reasonably comfortable situation, a 1.7 second lead over Ayrton Senna. We take a break here on Eurosport. Join us again shortly for this intriguing Grand Prix here in Germany.
And this is the time for him to respond. Yes, he's knocked 6/10 of a second off the gap there. Maybe a little mistake from Nannini round the back, but you can't afford many of those with Senna breathing down your neck, and you can't afford back markers. That's Alex Caffey ahead of them. Well, he's a pretty experienced driver, and he's also Italian, which may or may not help Nannini. They don't. It could be national friendliness. It could also be domestic national rivalry. So Senna definitely closer, I should say, and mounting an attack, and that's good tactical driving by Senna to get right onto him when he's got the chance, and the chance being the fact that there's a slower car ahead of them. It's the old story that if the slower car does anything unexpected, there's only one person who can come off back.
To Hockenheim, and the intriguing situation is that Ayrton Senna is now again closing up on Alessandro Nannini for the lead of this Grand Prix. They're on their 29th lap of the 45-lap race, and the Benetton, of course, is still on the original rubber that it went out on at 2 o'clock this afternoon, whereas Ayrton Senna has been in for a pit stop, and they're coming up now to lap one of the back markers, but very interesting situation. There's the third place man, Gerhard Berger, who's 6 seconds behind Senna, and in fourth place is Prost, fifth Boutsen, and sixth Patrese.
Yes, we've got a situation. Alessandro Nannini leading the race, not made a pit stop, not showing any indication at all that he wants to make a pit stop, and certainly as long as he's got the lead, he's going to hold on to that. If he had to come into the pits now, he would drop back probably all the way back down to 5th or 6th spot. So Benetton deciding not to have him come in. Certainly the lap times that Nannini has been running at indicate his tyres are in perfect condition. Ayrton Senna running second is only running at matching the pace, and it's still Nannini who has set the fastest race lap so far. Berger in third spot, 6 seconds behind Senna, is running lap times absolutely identical to Ayrton Senna, so therefore he's not making much impression. The gap tending to seesaw. Normally it's when they come into traffic that one driver gets a slight advantage over the other, and that generally is accounting for the changes in times. But we got Thierry Boutsen in the pits. We thought Boutsen was going to stay out, but he's decided not to. He's come in having given up that rather unequal challenge of one set of Goodyears and his Williams, having a pit stop fresh set of tyres after a rather long and slow pit stop. There's something more with Boutsen's Williams, the left rear tyre appearing to be uncooperative. Mechanics working to get that wheel back into place. That's a pit stop that's absolutely disastrous for Williams and for Boutsen. So his points, chances, I think, are evaporating. Well, he's leaving the pits now, and that was close to 30 seconds he was standing still. And a lot of work left now for Boutsen to finish up with only even 1 point.
And that will put Capelli up into the points. So Capella up into 6th place. So it's still Nannini Senna, and as we see, this intriguing battle still going on. Berger, in fact, maintaining the gap of about 6 seconds, but interestingly enough, Prost dropping back in 4th place slightly. He was 15 seconds behind Berger. It's now 16.1. Then Patrese is 9 seconds behind him. Boutsen has been in the pits and, of course, has dropped right out of it. Not right out of it, but certainly out of the championship points.
The gap now again, it's this seesawing between just over a second, just under a second. The lap times of the first 3 cars virtually identical at this point in the race. No change. Ayrton Senna sitting a comfortable, one might say, 1.1 seconds behind Nannini, but I wonder, has Ayrton Senna got anything up his sleeve? Is he really trying to control the wear and the condition of his tyres, or is he giving it everything he's got? He doesn't want to have to make a pit stop. If he does, then of course any chance of victory will be totally gone. But he must be somewhat perplexed by the pace of Nannini in this V8 Benetton Ford. He probably knows that the Nannini's car is running on the harder tyres. Certainly the McLaren pits would be aware of that. Nannini now in slow motion. Replay of him coming into the stadium, dropping the car, the rear of the car just off the track. There's a bit of a dip there. You see a shower of sparks. Those are the titanium skid blocks on the bottom of the car. They're there to protect the carbon fibre chassis so it doesn't get worn away. Titanium is replaceable. Carbon fibre is a lot harder to glue back together. We are almost back to the identical part of the circuit we saw just a few seconds ago.
He has been fairly rough on the car, John. I mean, he's hopping a lot of the curbs and riding it out, as we saw at that point, as opposed to Senna, who's been absolute sort of kitten-like with his McLaren.
Yes, I think by Senna driving that way, obviously he is trying to give some care and concern to the condition of his car and his tyres. But Boutsen seems to, not Boutsen, I beg your pardon, Nannini seems to be able to be fairly muscular with his car. He is sliding over curves, attacking them fairly hard. Maybe the difference is just that the B compound tyre with today's conditions is the tyre the right choice, and he's able to drive in a fairly free and uninhibited fashion, whereas challenger Ayrton Senna may having to be more considered and thoughtful about the way he goes about shadowing Nannini. Gerhard Berger dropping further and further back. In fact, he's dropped out of picture there. He was 6.7 seconds as he went past the start-finish line. Look how Nannini really whacks that curve on the inside, the left-hand side of the car, becoming airborne. The car, of course, loses downforce when he does that, but, well, Nannini gets on with the program, doesn't seem to worry about it too much.
And Senna, I noticed on the first of those chicanes, not even drifting out to the curb even. And as you say, there's Berger. It's dropped from 6 to 8 seconds. So Berger in some kind of problem. And I wonder, is that going to give Prost a chance of 3rd place? All essential, of course, in the World Championship, with Prost at the moment leading Senna by 2 points. Alessandro Nannini is in 9th position, incidentally, in the World Championship. He's so far got 7 points. His best finish was Imola, where he was 3rd and 4th in Mexico.
And we've got new fastest race lap to date, 1:46.602, and that, in fact, I believe, is a new lap record by Thierry Boutsen with his new set of rubber on his Renault engine Williams. So Boutsen, well, maybe he would have been better to have made that pit stop a lot earlier in the race instead of trying to soldier on that one set of tyres. But that would appear to be a new lap record set by Thierry Boutsen in the Renault engine Williams.
At 1:45.602, which beats Mansell's 1:45.718 before, and it just shows the enormous advance that the normally aspirated cars have made.
Yes, and this is truly a power circuit. So the fact that these cars are giving away something like 300 horsepower then indicates the development that takes place with the chassis and the tyre development, the aerodynamics. And here's a man who's got a pretty aerodynamic car, Ivan Capelli, but now we have gone back again to Nannini and Ayrton Senna visually closer. Senna having just posted a 1:45.961. So Senna now making a little bit of an attack up to the back of Nannini. Somewhat unhappy looking Nelson Piquet. He doesn't like to walk all that much, and that was a rather long distance he walked. Probably he's unhappy because it's not him in the lead of the race, it's his teammate Nannini. But of course he must be encouraged by the performance of the Nannini-Benetton-Ford partnership that it can lead the race on the 33rd lap of 45. And Senna getting ever closer now.
And the situation, the leaders are coming up to complete 33 laps. The situation is Nannini, Senna, that you're watching this battle, intriguing battle. Berger in third place, 7 seconds down. Prost in fourth place, dropping another second, 17 seconds down. And those are the top four that are really fighting it out here at the moment.
Nannini now beginning to sense that there's a charge coming from Ayrton Senna. For the last number of laps he seemed to be very much in control, but now Senna beginning to threaten very seriously indeed. And this is they call it the second wind that Senna has taken, and he now really looks like he's going to mount a serious attack as we approach the second chicane. I don't know if he's got enough speed to pull out. Well, he can't do it, there's not enough room here, but after this chicane and the run down to the third chicane, Senna is going to give Nannini a fairly hard time.
Yes, big attack on there for first place, but also noticing that Prost is definitely dropping back from Berger now. The gap there has opened up to 19 seconds, but look at this is Senna's big major attack.
And he's taken the lead. Senna has come alongside Nannini, timed it absolutely perfectly, taken the lead into the third chicane. Nannini was not in any position to respond, he had no more speed. Senna got out of the slipstream at the right time, got himself alongside Nannini, and that's all he had to do. Once he was alongside, that was it as far as Nannini was concerned. He had to concede his lead. Ayrton Senna has taken in a very well judged and masterful overtaking manoeuvre, and Ayrton Senna is now in the lead. Alessandro Nannini in second spot. Gerhard Berger a further 7 seconds behind Nannini in second place, and Alain Prost, as you say, Alan, sliding away from Berger, now probably 20 seconds behind Gerhard Berger in the second Honda McLaren.
So as we watch the new leader of the German Grand Prix, that is Ayrton Senna, who's now pulling away slightly from Nannini, already opening up an advantage of 1.4 seconds. Join us back here in Eurosport shortly.
Any time at all on Berger. 5th Patrese, 6th Capelli, and here's a replay of the passing manoeuvre.
Yes, and conventionally done, but very well done, because we'd seen earlier the difficulty Senna had. If he wasn't perfectly placed in the toe, he couldn't get there, and at this point he's only getting alongside, and then being Senna, he just stays off the brakes. He's the sort of man who will look at Nannini and just wait till Nannini brakes, and irrespective of when that is almost, maybe half an eye on the corner in case Nannini's just going to go suicidal and thus not try and make the corner at all, but he will watch you because he knows that whatever you do, he'll be able to handle braking later.
And he's now 1.5 seconds ahead of Nannini, having got past the Italian. He's putting in another superhuman effort to build a cushion between himself and the Benetton Ford. We're on lap 35 in this 45-lap race. Ayrton Senna most certainly looks as though he has got it made, as he did in 1988 and 89, and is on his way to the hat-trick at the present moment.
Nannini slowed down a bit on that lap, probably lost a bit of time with being fast, of course, slows you down very slightly. We'll see if he can respond, because it's very important that Nannini should not let Senna get away. I believe that Senna's tyres will be in a worse state than his at the end of the race. Nannini really must try and push and stay close to Senna, because I think his tyres may yet deteriorate, and at that point there's no reason why Nannini shouldn't. He needs to be in a position to remount a challenge in the closing 5 laps of the race. In the meantime, behind, Alain
Minus with the leaders on the 35th lap of this 45-lap German Grand Prix. The situation is Senna leads from Nannini in second place, 1.4 seconds behind. In third, it's Berger, 8 seconds down. Then Prost at 28 seconds down, and that gap is opening up all the time. Then Patrese, a long gap to him, 38 seconds. Capelli is the last man in the points, and then it's Boutsen, who's travelling very quickly at the moment, having been in for fresh tyres. Eric Bernard in 8th place, 9th is Warwick, 10th is Alesi, 11th is Suzuki, who's actually a lap down and is now retired.
Yeah, Suzuki has just retired as we say that his car's been pushed into the pits. But here's the man now who is in the lead and opening up a gap every lap on the man that led for really the bulk of the race, Alessandro Nannini, and a great race Nannini has had. But Ayrton Senna has taken control. He did it masterfully at this part of the track, coming down the third straight of this long Hockenheim circuit. Pulled out, passed perfectly, took the lead, and has now got a lead of over 2 seconds from Alessandro Nannini, with Gerhard Berger running third, a further 6 seconds behind Nannini. And really now, I would say all Senna has to do is just continue what he's doing. Remember, Senna did have a pit stop. Nannini has not been into the pits for tyres, but Senna stopped quite early. He came in, changed onto another set of C tyres. He went back out, but didn't really get on with the program. He seemed not to be able to go quickly. What we may now have to say is that Senna was deliberately containing himself in the performance of the car. He didn't want to run too hard on the tyres and risk having to make a second pit stop. So he got past Nannini. Once he was past Nannini, he has a clear track. He's now got over 3 seconds of a lead on Nannini in second space, and he's just done a lap in 1 minute 45.7. And Senna appears to be very much in control and in command of the German Grand Prix.
And Berger suddenly has closed the gap in third place. It's come down from 8 to 6 seconds. We could just see him in that long shot behind Nannini. So the McLaren's beginning to look very strong in the closing sections of this race. Senna's just done a lap of 1:45.7.11. But remember that Terry Boutsen has already broken the existing lap record of 1:45 with a lap of 1:45.6.02. Senna, Nannini, Berger, Prost, and Prost seems to be in some kind of trouble because he's dropping dramatically back behind Berger. It's 24 seconds now, and Patrese is undoubtedly closing on him for 4th place. So Prost in jeopardy of losing more points here as Patrese closes in.
Well, this has not been a very good weekend for Ferrari. It looked terrific at the start of the race. 2 Ferraris in the second row just behind the 2 McLarens. We thought we were going to see a duel of the same proportions that we saw in Great Britain, and we're just out of the corner, the top of the screen, Eric Bernard's Lola Lamborghini also in all sorts of trouble. So unfortunate day for the 2 Lolas. Bernard about to join his teammate Suzuki in the pits. John Alesi just being overtaken again by Ayrton Senna. Ayrton Senna, of course, lapping Alesi having had a disastrous pit stop. He came into the pits, looked for the little slot he was due to dive into, came in too fast, missed it, had to do another lap, and that really spelled the end of any opportunity of Alesi getting a point today. Eric Bernard rolling slowly to a halt. His car is not even going to make it back to the pits. He's probably going to stop out of that graveyard of cars, the one just before the 3rd chicane.
And the graveyard it really is, John, because we always suspect the circuit to take a high toll in cars, and particularly in this heat, and we've only 12 runners left of the 26 starters at this stage.
Well, I have to say, Alan, it's no surprise. It's been a traditionally extremely tough race. These 4 long straights, the engines are flat out for quite a long time, and while they are racing engines that are designed and intended for that kind of use, doesn't mean that they're always totally reliable. And here's the first glimpse we've had of Derek Warwick this weekend, and here we are in car with Derek Warwick, his Lola Lamborghini currently running an 8th spot. Derek really benefiting more from the retirement rate than from the performance of his car. But Derek, one of the grittiest and toughest and most professional performers in Formula One racing. Really love to have seen Derek get a really top-line drive maybe a few years earlier in his career, because there's no doubt he was a man that could have won many Grand Prix, and of course could have also had the potential to be a British world champion. But it looks like Derek may never ever receive that opportunity now. He's almost in his 10th season of Grand Prix racing, and opportunities like that are very few and far between.
We're about to see the leader go past him. I would imagine any moment now. He may be able to hang on as he comes out of the stadium. But Ayrton Senna coming up to lap 8th place man, Derek Warwick. And there they are. Senna just choosing his moment. He'll probably wait till he gets down this long straight.
Yes, he was waiting because the line down past the pit straight to the right of the line was covered in rubber. The little balls of rubber that come off these tyres. He didn't want to go onto that because that would have got stuck onto the rubber of his tyre and it would have had a major effect on the handling. So Senna saw that, stayed behind Warwick. He knew he could pass him down the next straight anyway. He had no need to rush. He's got almost 5 seconds now of an advantage over Nannini, and of course Nannini has also got to pass Warwick, so that's an indication of how a racing driver thinks while he's driving.
And Nannini may have 5 seconds in Senna, but he's beginning to fall into the clutches of Berger, because Berger is just 4.5 seconds, and he's about half that gap to Nannini. Prost again 28 seconds behind that, and Patrese now down to 5 seconds behind Prost. So Patrese again definitely closing on Prost now, although we're not seeing it.
We've got no indication, Alan, at all of what the problems of Prost's car is, whether it is tyres, whether it's engine, whether it's the more familiar Ferrari problem, that of not just the gearbox. People always say the gearbox, but it's actually to do with the way the gearbox functions. It's a very complex system, and sometimes it's totally reliable. In the case of the last 3 Grand Prix, it was for Prost. Mansell's had problems. We saw at Silverstone when he had that fabulous drive, and in the end the gearbox packed up, and so the Ferrari gearbox probably is the source of most of Prost's problems. One has to guess that's what it is. There's no other obvious sign of engine performance being reduced, possibly overheating. It is a very warm day today, and if you get grass in your radiators, if you run a little bit wide, or even all this rubber you see in the track, that can clog the radiator inlets, and that of course can cause overheating. And the Ferrari engine is a very sensitive engine to temperature.
You can see now the top runners coming in amongst some of the back markers. Now unusual to see that man, Gene Lacey, a back marker this year, but that was really a mistake in the pit road, not out on the track, when he overshot his pit, and it's cost him dearly here today. He's actually still in 9th position, but of course a lap down on Senna. Still Senna, Nannini, Berger down to 4.3 seconds, I notice now. And then we have the fairly long gap to Prost, Patrese 5th, Boutsen 6th, 7th is Ivan Capelli, 8th is Warwick, 9th is Alessi, 10th Caffey, 11th Larini, and those are all the runners still in this German Grand Prix. So we're down to an 11 field still running here.
Yes, we've still got a few laps to go. Car's currently on the 39th lap, and it's a 45 lap race, so you can expect to see 1 or 2 of the cars running at the back of the field, not making it through to the end. This is, as I said earlier, probably the toughest Grand Prix, or one of the toughest Grand Prix in the calendar. Everybody knows it when they come here. Doesn't ever change the outcome. Now Warwick being lapped by Nannini in 2nd spot, and of course Nannini was able to see in his mirrors. He's got Gerhard Berger coming closer. Here we see Warwick. That little bit of correction that Warwick had to make has really been indicative of the handling of this car throughout the weekend. It's been a real pig, I think. That's the politest way that both drivers would describe it. Great shame that a team such as Lotus is not really running at the front technically. But, really, I think the charisma that the team had in the days of Colin Chapman has been vanishing over the years since the loss of Chapman.
And there they are at the end of 40 laps. The situation is Senna, Nannini, Berger. Join us back shortly here on Eurosport for the final laps of the German Grand Prix.
Because Berger not only has to catch him, but then he has the bigger problem of passing him, and they're running rapidly out of laps. In the meantime, Senna is moving away pretty comfortably now. Gap at over 6 seconds to Nannini, and I'm sure Nannini's concern is no longer with Senna at all, and is purely with Berger's progress. But I think Nannini, probably now his B compound tires are getting a little bit tired, but they look to be consistent enough still for him to be able to hang on.
It's going to be a very close run thing for second place, though. Ayrton Senna there has well and truly broken Alessandro Nannini. Probably, as James said, because going the whole race distance on one set of Goodyear Bs has proved to be too much for Nannini. But he's driven an absolutely superb race. He's got the prospect of 6 points at the present moment to add to the 7 that he's already got. He's only in 9th position in the World Championship. Ayrton Senna going round the Sachs curve and into the right-hander before the final right-hander, and that is Alesi, and he looks to me to be in trouble the way he's being passed by people. Well, he obviously is. Alain.
With just 4 laps to go for the leaders here at Hockenheim in the German Grand Prix, it is still Senna comfortably in the lead, as we saw Alesi just limping home there. He's going to be one of the many retirements, bringing it possibly down to 10 finishers here in Germany. Nannini in second place, 6.9 seconds behind, getting the ever greater attentions from Gerhard Berger in the second McLaren. And then in the next position we have Prost, a good 40 seconds behind, who could well be overtaken by Patrese before the end of the race, and Boutsen in 6th place in the points.
Yes, Riccardo Patrese is closing very quickly indeed to Alain Prost's 4th spot, and we imagine in the 4 remaining laps that Patrese is going to make a major effort indeed to take that place away from Prost. 4th spot, of course, represents 3 points. Patrese is hungry and greedy, he wants it. But of course, Alain Prost will want those 3 points, because having Senna win this race, if that is to be the outcome, I believe will put Senna back into the lead in the championship, or at best, at least on equal points. So 4th spot for Prost is very important indeed in this German Grand Prix.
And Senna, you can see there, really nursing at home at this stage. Is 6.9 seconds now over Nannini, and keeping well off the curbs. And really, we used to call Prost the professor of backmarker problems here for Nannini as he comes up to lap Larini there.
Well, it's one of the Ligiers, and they seem to love to race you when you're lapping them. I don't understand racing drivers, that when they're being lapped, they insist upon racing you. But certainly Alio has been one of those people that have always wanted to lap you, or race with you when you're being lapped. Now Senna starting place 1, lap 3 to go. A comfortable lead now for Senna. He can afford to relax. 7.5 seconds now ahead of Nannini in 2nd spot. Gerhard Berger further 4 seconds behind Nannini. And then we got a shot of JJ Leto. It is Montevideo, the rear bodywork peeling off. And that is a problem which may well result in the entire rear bodywork of the car coming off. It could conceivably, if it did come off, take the rear ring off as well, and that would be a problem for JJ, but he's still soldiering on.
So the leader on his 43rd lap of this 45 lap race, there's Senna, and Nannini still second, and Alio has been disqualified. We've got the message on our screens here. Philippe Alio being disqualified. Nannini 7.5 seconds behind, Berger 4 seconds behind that, Prost 31 seconds behind, and he's managing to withhold this pressure from Patrese. He's actually opened up the gap a little bit more again, and Boutsen will be the last person on the points.
Well, I suspect Patrese has been in traffic somewhere. I don't expect Patrese just to drop 2 seconds like that, and usually what happens is there's been a slower car has been in a crucial part of the track at the wrong time, and that has caused the gap to increase between Prost and Patrese. But of course, we've still got a little bit of leeway left, and here we see yet again Gerhard Berger coming up behind that errant Ligier. Whether Berger has got the same problem getting past or not, we'll have to see. Going back to this thing of drivers racing the lead cars at this stage in the race, there's no advantage whatsoever, and they should be pulling across to let the front 3 cars get through easily. And we see now Senna behind Ivan Capelli in his Leighton house. Alain Prost coming now in the final of the 4 straights. Got a narrows, Alex Caffey behind him. Caffey currently in 9th spot. Prost trying to respond to the attack by Patrese. Senna now ahead of Capelli.
With 2 laps
and a big puff of smoke coming out of the back of Capelli's car there, just as we saw him exiting the chicane. Big puff of oil smoke, so Capelli really now having to nurse his Leighton house with that V8 Judd engine home to the finish.
And of course Gugelmin already having pitted, so it will be fairly questionable whether we're going to get a Leighton House finisher in this Grand Prix. Berger now down to 3.7 seconds behind Nannini, and Prost still maintaining that gap to Patrese, so it seems less likely we're going to get a change there. But Senna, it's really been a fabulous Grand Prix for him. He came into the pits, not the first corner by any means, but it was a fantastically quick pit stop, out again, and then seemed to take a while to get accustomed to the new tyres, or maybe just chose to take his time to get accustomed to the new tyres. And we used to call Prost the professor, but really this has certainly been a very academic performance indeed by Senna. And it's beginning to look extraordinarily likely that we're going to see him to go on to his 24th win. And John, there's Berger trying to get Larini again.
Yes, I mean, that's amazing. Berger's been behind him for now over a lap. Larini is not allowing him to go through. I don't know what Larini thinks he's achieving by doing this, because Berger ought to be encouraged to go through. Ayrton Senna there, back on the pit straight. 8-second lead.
And it's really given Nannini a bit of a breather, that incident, because it had been right down to 3 seconds, but that must have opened up that gap again.
Yes, it has. Now this is the last lap of the race. Ayrton Senna crossing the line, 7.6 seconds lead on Nannini. Berger a further 4.7 seconds behind Nannini. And then we have this long gap till we come to Alain Prost in 4th spot, with Patrese in 5th, but Patrese's got to get past Alboreto. That's Alex Caffey in the arrows. So I think the prospect for Patrese to take that 4th spot from Prost is remote. Prost looking almost secure now for 3 points in this title chase he is involved in, embroiled in really, with this man, the man leading the race, Ayrton Senna, who led the race at the start, who then went into the pits, changed tyres, had the quickest pit stop I've ever seen, rejoined the race just behind Nannini, but stayed there a very long time indeed. And it was only within the last 8 laps that he was able to finally pass Nannini. But I think that was a part of a very well thought out and executed game plan on the part of Senna and McLaren. They didn't charge too hard on those new second set of tyres, but the point of the race where it mattered, the last quarter of the race, Senna made his attack, got past, took the lead, and has opened up a comfortable lead, and is now only 4 corners away from checking the checkered flag and having his first victory in 4 races. Look, taking his hand off the wheel, waving to the crowds, waving to the pits. In fact, that's just behind the McLaren hospitality unit, so there are a few people there that probably were showing their pleasure at this performance from Ayrton Senna and the entire Marlboro McLaren team. They've done a fantastic job. They came here to win the race. Senna has done that for them. He's got 9 points. He's back on the winner's trail.
And Nannini comes through in 2nd place after a very creditable performance indeed. But Senna now clocks up his 24th win. He's also broken all records in pole positions. He's now got 47. And of course the big news is that he goes back into the lead into the World Championship. Berger through in 3rd place. And Senna has now got 48 points as opposed to Prost 44. If Prost, and there he is, can manage to hold on to 4th place, and it looks as if he's going to.
Yes, he is, but Patrese has closed up on that last lap, but it's not enough. He's still about 3 seconds behind Alain Prost. Alain Prost will take 4th spot. There we see Riccardo Patrese now in 5th spot, so 3 points for Prost, 2 for Patrese. And
the last scorer should be Boutsen, who will be due along shortly. But so the World Championship situation is going to be Senna 48 points, Prost 44, Berger up in 3rd place with 29 points, then 4th equal will be Piquet with 18 and Boutsen 18, and 6th equal Alessi, Mansell and Nannini with 13 points. And there Prost stopping.
Yes indeed, well whatever Prost's problems were severe enough, he didn't want to even do the slowing down lap, so he's taken the flag. And Ayrton Senna, Gerhard Berger out of their cars as well. In fact, what they used to do at Hockenheim was, at the end of the pit straight, they used to take you around the corner and then straight into the Parc Fermé. Obviously, Senna and Berger, no intention of doing a slowing down lap. They've stopped just by the entrance to Alessandro Nannini. These are the first 3 guys. Well, they're the winners. 2nd place man, 3rd place man. They will be taken from here to the rostrum, where they will be presented with their trophies. Senna's, of course, will go to the McLaren collection, as will Gerhard Berger's. What Alessandro Nannini will do with his, I don't know. They will then be given a bottle of bubbly, and they'll give it a good old shake and shower the the press below, destroying probably a few £1,000 worth of camera lenses in the process. But Alan Prost certainly didn't want to continue round. Ron Dennis looking very happy indeed. Trying not to look happy, Ron. Trying very hard indeed not to look happy, but sharing a joke with Gordon Message of Benetton. His man's finishing second, and that's a very good result for Benetton. I would say that's the most solid result they've had this year. And there's a real indication of the strength of that V8 engine and the fact that Benetton are gradually becoming more and more competitive. They've had a difficult year last year. They've made major revisions to the car. The Cosworth Ford engine is now becoming a threat for out-and-out victory. And of course, Nannini really would love to win a race on merit. The victory he had in Japan last year was the result of Senna's disqualification, and a very controversial decision that will always remain.
Nannini, what an up and down weekend it's been for him, from near disaster in qualifying yesterday when he had a very major accident, one of the chicanes, and the flash fire that happened in that car fortunately went out as quick as it started, but it certainly, he was studying the accident very closely on video yesterday evening to try and find out exactly what happened. It would seem that he just rode the car at the wrong time. Anyway, it was a pretty nasty one. Here he is back on the rostrum, very much so in second place, and of course led the Grand Prix for so many laps.
And of course, a result like this for Nannini, it's the best thing he could have done. It's a bit like falling off your horse. You've got to get back on it straight away to keep your confidence, to keep your nerve. Nannini wasn't particularly startling in qualifying yesterday, but today he set all that to rights and he drove an absolutely superb race. He didn't make a pit stop for tyres. That was a strategy that Benetton employed. They started on the harder B compound. They ran the entire way through the race on that B compound. The two McLarens stopped for tyres. Berger was in first, then Senna came in later. Senna had the quickest pit stop I've ever seen during the course of a Formula One race, 6.22 seconds. Absolutely phenomenal, and certainly had made up for the atrocious pit stops the team had in the French Grand Prix. And Ayrton Senna now, he also is trying hard not to smile, but I think that race victory, this one here in the German Grand Prix, will be one of the ones that he will consider to be the most significant of his 1990 campaign. And now that he's back in the lead of the championship, the place he needed to be, because Hungary is the next Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time, and of course Eurosport will be there live. That's a difficult circuit for McLaren. It's a circuit where Ferrari won last year. The nature of that circuit is tight and twisty. Big emphasis is put on the car rather than the horsepower. Hockenheim, as we've seen, has been a horsepower circuit, but Hungary in 2 weeks' time is very much a handling circuit.
And it's quite extraordinarily long victory walk right up the full length of the pit road, as we see the journalists getting a chance to get a quote for them before they go onto the rostrum. Just to remind you, you saw that there they are. There's the World Championship positions. Senna moving ahead again of Prost by 4 points, and it's really wide open, this championship. And of course, earlier on, Mansell retiring, and Mansell, who had pledged to help Prost to his World Championship goal, but Mansell retiring when he was very much pressuring Prost at the time. Berger's still there in third place. Boutsen, good race once he got his new tyres on, and of course has we think the honour of having the new lap record here at Hockenheim, Terry Boutsen. And then Piquet, and another indication of the quite good reliability, really, of the Benettons this year. The people that didn't get in the points were Capelli, Warwick, Caffey and Lorini, who finished here at Hockenheim, but were out of contention in terms of World Championship points.
Yes, one man who really, I think, is going to be extremely sad about his day's efforts will be Nigel Mansell. Another race he hasn't finished, and as much as one might have hoped for Mansell that he could win here today and get on a roll like Prost has had over the previous 3 Grand Prix, this really spells, I think, the end for Nigel Mansell in the 1990 World Championship. And it's very difficult for a man who is as competitive as Nigel to have to face the reality that your hopes of winning in 1990 are more or less over. But he has, as you say, pledged support to helping Alan Prost try and retain his World Championship. Remember, he won the championship last year. That was decided in the Japanese Grand Prix, one of the most controversial results of many, many years indeed, when Prost, I must say, having seen the view of that shot, appeared to drive into the side of Ayrton Senna's car rather than take the corner. But whatever it takes to win the championship, I suppose that's the name of the game these days.
And not only is this Senna's third win here at Hockenheim, putting him equal with Piquet in terms of success in Formula 1 here at Hockenheim, it's also his third in succession, and probably one of the most satisfying of those three.
It's certainly satisfying, but it's, I think, one of the most significant and crucial results for Senna. He came here, the team since the British Grand Prix 2 weeks ago have come here and tested at a 3-day test here. Then during the week leading up to the Grand Prix, they spent 2 days extensive testing at Silverstone, testing the things that we've seen on the car here, that very strange looking device in place of a windscreen, that black carbon fiber windscreen which is designed to deflect the air away from the driver's head, away from around the back of the car, but to help the rear wing work. And obviously those changes have paid dividends. Yesterday McLaren spent the entire qualifying session running the car in race trim in conditions that are very similar to what we've seen today. All those factors I feel have been a contribution to that result we have just seen. And there Ayrton Senna, the man who won the race, absolutely delighted with his outcome. Good day's work for him. And of course now, well, he'll have a couple of days off, and I'm sure McLaren will be testing somewhere else, such as the workload today of a top Grand Prix driver in a top team like McLaren. You might get a couple of days to catch your breath, go home, pay a few bills, but then it's back into the seat. A couple of 3 days testing at the next venue, then back to the Grand Prix. It's a very hard schedule, and particularly McLaren drivers. Gerhard Berger, when he joined McLaren, didn't quite appreciate at the time what he was going to get involved in. McLaren is a team that is about total commitment. It expects commitment from everybody that works in the factory. It expects it from the drivers, and of course Ron Dennis, who leads the team, is, I suppose, the leader in total commitment when it comes to putting together the definitive Grand Prix team.
And I wonder, we're looking at the man who may be on his way to his second World Championship, the man who started in karts, as indeed most of the top drivers do, graduated through British Formula 1600 up through 2000 and into Formula 3, and of course joined the Grand Prix scene in '84 with Tolman. Since then he's driven for Lotus and of course McLaren, and this has been his far most successful stay. The constructors situation, incidentally, is that McLaren now again have increased their lead to 77 points over Ferrari's 57. Benetton are in third place with 31 points. Williams have 30 points, and Tyrrell have 14 with Leighton-House 6. And what a day it has been for Alessandro Nannini. There, no doubt, he doesn't get the opportunity too often to be on the rostrum and shake the champagne. It's by far his best result of the year. The other good result he had was at Imola when he was third. He was fourth at Mexico. And of course, his teammate Nelson Piquet has been fairly banging in the points for the World Championship fairly consistently also. Ron Dennis with the trophy.
And that little signal from Ayrton Senna, the clenched fist. His father is here this weekend. He's been shadowing him throughout the weekend. In fact, he's been over in Europe for the last couple of weeks. Ayrton is very, very close indeed to his family. He spends a lot of time between races when he has the opportunity. In Sao Paulo, where the family home is, he doesn't get too many opportunities to go back, but if he does have about 4 or 5 spare days, he jumps in his own aircraft, flies home, and he feels that that change of environment, the family life, the closeness to his family is very valuable to him. He gains a lot of strength, and Ron Dennis now beginning to loosen up a little bit and enjoy the reality of today's results. All that hard work, commitment that is made by the team. Have the best result you can have on the day. Could have been better, I suppose, in definitive terms, with having a first and second. Ron being the hardest taskmaster in Formula 1, he would have preferred first and second, because of course that would have been more manufacturers' points. But here we see that really masterful move on the part of Senna when he overtook Nannini 3/4 of the way through the race, coming down the third straight into this, the quickest of the 3 chicanes. Really, that pass was the consequence of coming out of the previous chicane slightly quicker than Nannini and using the momentum to come up behind Nannini and then use his slipstream and pass him. And that was a classic overtaking maneuver. If you wanted to show young and up-and-coming racing drivers how you should overtake correctly, well, that's the way you do it. Now, here we are a little bit behind the scenes. Berger tiling off, Nannini pretty well stripped off.
Jeff
Guy's fairly hot.
Interviewing him.
I often wondered why these guys look so cool when they're interviewed. Now we know they all go in and have a quick towel off, put on a fresh t-shirt, dry the hair. Nannini obviously has been perspiring fairly freely. I suspect that Alessandro Nannini not maybe quite to the peak of fitness of Ayrton Senna or even Gerhard Berger, who have the Willy Dungal training method as part of the involvement in the team. Alessandro Nannini, much more relaxed man about his motor racing, enjoys his cigarettes and his coffee. Totally verboten in the McLaren pits.
And he's not going to be the only member, John, of the Nannini family performing here at the Hockenheim Stadium this summer, because we noticed on a poster outside that along with Tina Turner, his sister, who's a big pop star in Italy, will be performing here at Hockenheim. So the next race, of course, is going to be in Hungary, in the Hungaroring, and that's on Sunday the 12th of August, live on Eurosport, and that will be an occasion not to be missed, but a totally different type of circuit from here. In fact, one of the slowest circuits on the Grand Prix scene.
It's a very, very difficult circuit. Last year, of course, the circuit was slightly modified to increase the average speed of it, but it's still a very tight and fiddly circuit, and it's not a circuit that does favour the McLarens. It's a circuit I would say will favour the Benettons possibly, and of course the Ferraris. But looking at the tyres on the Williams, you can see how well smeared up they are, and of course that's pickup on the tyre. The car has come in slowly, and there's a lot of loose rubber on the track, and that's the loose rubber that's been picked up on those tyres. A tyre engineer measuring the tread depth to see how much wear there has been. Now Senna's car being prepared for scrutineering. These results, of course, are provisional, because until the car has passed scrutineering and declared legal, it is only then that the results will be declared official. I'm sure there's not much doubt of that, and these three men are going to be the men declared the first, second and third finishers in this year's 1990 German Grand Prix.
The soft tires, and
of course after you've done 45 laps at a very high speed around this place, we can now listen to Ayrton.
Gerhard was pushing quite hard behind me, and we could not pace ourselves in a slower way to maintain the tires. So then we had trouble with the tires. He pit together with Prost, and then I decided to come in too, and was the right choice to come in because with the difficulty. After that, when I get out of the pits, Nannini just passed by, just managed to go through. I had some difficulty for a couple of laps with the pressure, so I wait. But then when I tried to push, I had some problem with the engine, and the engine lost some power. So I tried just to go through, but I realized I couldn't do it. So I decided to back off and give some time, think about, refresh the tires again, because being behind was too hard on the tires, and wait for later race. I realized he had not stopped for tires, so for sure later in the race he would have more problem, because his tires would be worn out, while I had the new fresh tires. So it worked good. Towards the end he started to have more difficulties with grip, and I was able to be more stronger, to come closer, and I managed to get a very good tow and then overtake him.
Very hot weather conditions, very tiring race for you?
Well, it was hard, but the circuit is not too bad. Here, long straights, you have time to take your time, get some fresh air, and it's not as hard as many other circuits. The main thing were the tires, really, the car balance, reliability. And we had good reliability, we had good performance. Finally, we managed to come back and have two McLarens in the top three.
Gerhard.
Now to Gerhard Berger to get his version of the race.
For the first 10 laps or so, I gather that was your plan. And then after you came into the pits, you had a great difficulty in getting anywhere near Nannini. Were you having the same sort of engine trouble as Ayrton?
First, I didn't want to push too much in the beginning about the tires, but I had to do it because the Ferraris was just behind me, and so I had to push. I was a lot of time quite near to Ayrton, but my engine didn't feel very strong. I couldn't use the slipstream really, and then I decided to make a pit stop early. I had some understeer, tires goes down. After the pit stop, I was fourth behind the two Benetton, and it was no way for me to pass them on the straight. There was a lot of time in the very near to Piquet, was really under the gearbox, but just had no way to pass him. They just pulled away on the straight. I think I didn't have the best engine today, and so I'm quite happy for the third place.
So Gerhard Berger, not too happy a man there, and Nannini, a delighted man, obviously.
You owed it a lot to the fact that you didn't have to stop for tyres. You put B tyres on. That was obviously a very good decision. Was that something you've been planning a long way ahead, or a last-minute decision?
Sind wir unterwegs?
No, we got the decision. The decision. We got the decision this morning, and we keep the B tires. This decision for start, and no problem. And we had some little problem the last 15 laps, and I had some little oversteer, and I kept it for 10 laps Senna, but he was just a little faster than me in the straight. And but when he was a half second faster, but when he followed me very, very close, maybe he lost something in aerodynamic. He lost every time 10 meters, and he was in difficult to pass me. And then he passed me. He was 1/2 second faster, and I keep it in the second position. For me, it's okay, the second position.
Certainly a great result after your problems on Friday. Thank you.
No.
So Alessandro Nannini there, very happy, as he said, in second position. And so let us remember that it's Senna's 24th win, and he goes back into the World Championship. And we've enjoyed Hockenheim.
So a crushing victory here in Germany for Ayrton Senna, his 4th of the season, with Alessandro Nannini second, Gerhard Berger in 3rd place, and Alain Prost 4th for Ferrari. 5th, Riccardo Patrese, and 6th, his teammate Thierry Boutsen in the Williams Renault. Now, I'm glad to say Emanuele Pirro is perfectly okay, a wrenched neck, and he hopes to be driving in Hungary. Now, in the World Championship, Ayrton Senna has moved back into the lead, 4 points ahead of Alain Prost, with Gerhard Berger still in 3rd place. Nelson Piquet and Thierry Boutsen tying for 4th, and a tie for 6th position between Jean Alesi, Alessandro Nannini and Nigel Mansell. In the Constructors' Championship, McLaren have increased their lead over Ferrari from 10 points to 20. Benetton in 3rd place, just 1 point ahead of Williams, with Tyrrell 5th and Leighton House 6th. In 2 weeks' time, it's the Hungarian Grand Prix. Last year, Nigel Mansell won it brilliantly. It's my kind of circuit, he says. But can he finish this year? Watch Grand Prix and see.